Welcome back to Linked by Golf, the podcast exploring the connections and journeys of people linked by the game. I'm your host, Ross McGuire, and this week I'm joined by Kendal McWade, a truly fascinating golf professional whose dedication to helping players develop their golfing skills is second to none. In this episode, we discuss Kendal's remarkable golfing journey and reflect on some of the great experiences he's had along the way. Let's go over to Kendal. Kendal, how you doing?
I'm good, Ross. Thanks for having me on.
It's been a long time since we last met. Only 20 years.
That's the kind of normal response I get from people. I see them every 20 years, so you're a regular.
Absolutely. And Kendal, in your own journey, you got to a point with your work in golf that you wanted to change how you were approaching the game with effectively customers, people who were coming to you for coaching. So what was that moment and what made you go down the path that you've been on for a number of years now?
Couple of things, Ross. First, the frustration with my own game. That was the driving force. I suppose it's always been the driving force. Prior to this major change, I felt as if I'd put and was putting in a reasonable amount of work in my game, irrespective of the level, but I just kept working hard, but I didn't seem to be progressing the way that I'd hoped. And the more I kind of knew about the game and the golf swing and all the stuff that is now out there, the worse I would say I became, or the less confident I became about, to put that golf ball from here down there somewhere. And that frustration led me to reading a book by pure chance called Extraordinary Golf by Fred Shoemaker. And I just loved the whole idea of his approach. So I went to see him and attended a school in 1997, I think it was, and went back two more occasions, dragging other coaches with me who had never heard of this guy, but I said, you need to come and see him. And that was the tipping point. So I came home from that and I just knew I couldn't keep coaching the way I'd been coaching. And I was a busy coach. And I couldn't keep coaching myself the way I was coaching. So that was the tipping point. So circa 2000 or thereabouts. And honestly, I was so lost. You have no idea. I came back with my head full of all these amazing ideas, and then reality struck home. And as I started doing what Fred does, which was a lot of it was down to throwing golf clubs, which was lots of fun, highly dangerous, but lots of fun. And then you come home to Scotland and you start throwing golf clubs, and everyone thinks you're a raving lunatic. And that stuck for the 25 years that I've been on this journey. They now know I'm a raving lunatic. They thought I was, and now they know. So that was a tipping point, Ross. That, yeah, primarily in a typically selfish way, it was about me and my game. But I did want to help. Of course, I wanted to help others, but I wanted to help myself. That was the driving force. So that was it.
Fantastic. And then, Kendall, how did you get into the game? So we kind of jumped in a little bit there, but what took you into golf? Was it something that was in the family or just an interest?
Yeah, I was more into football probably. But my dad every Sunday used to drive down to a place called Helensburgh on the west coast of Scotland, which was 45 minutes away from the house. But at the time, it was the only golf club I could get into. And he used to drop me off at the pier, and I used to fish. This wee boy, this wee 10-year-old boy with a rod about twice the height of me. I used to fire this thing off the pier and then put it in a stand and sit for 8 hours until my dad picked me up. So I decided that wasn't a career choice that I wanted to follow. I think the thing, I became reasonably good, reasonably quickly at the game, but I wasn't dreaming about being a golf pro. I definitely wasn't.
Right.
And I wasn't dreaming of being a fisherman either, I can assure you. But I did start to really love the game. But the thought of going to university was so strongly negative that I thought I need to do something. So I decided to give golf a go and joined as an assistant professional at a club just down the road called Cardross, which is a beautiful little place not far from Helensburgh where I took the game up. And that was it. But I must admit, as I say, it wasn't something I dreamed about all that time. I was dreaming far more about scoring goals in cup finals and playing for my favourite team. But the reality was I was at a pretty good school. Mum and dad put me in a very, very good school. I think I think their jaws fell when I said I was actually not going to be a doctor or a surgeon or whatever. I was going to be a golf pro. But they supported me wholeheartedly, which you needed to do in those days because at the time I had to get a train from the house down to Cardross, and I was paid £10 a week for about 70 hours. So it's
Wow.
quite low pay, relatively speaking. You get
Yeah.
more than that for an hour nowadays, and I had to pay for trains and food and everything, and that's why my mum and dad were great. But that's how I got into it, and it went on from there. I joined Barassi Golf Club and a guy called Bill Lockie for 4 years down at an amazing place under an amazing guy, and that really kind of got the juices going. He was a fantastic player. He was a national coach, and that was quite inspirational. But the game eventually got me because the lure of it was fantastic, and Scotland on an amazing tour called the Tartan Tour at the time. And that drove you on to keep trying to get better and win some money ultimately. But yeah, it wasn't a linear journey. The game certainly did not continue to progress in relation to the amount of effort I felt I was putting in. But that's what drove me again to reading the book and changing direction.
You must have been a pretty good player at the time, though, to first of all turn professional as an assistant and then keep that journey going through your qualifications and stuff. So, were you playing Tartan Tour events and all those kind of things back in the day as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I was fortunate as well. At the time at Helensburgh, we had an unbelievable junior team, which
Right.
included Colin and Gordon Dalgleish,
Wow.
who went on to being internationalists and Scottish amateur champions, etc. And now they have a huge golfing business. I haven't seen them for 40 years probably, but that was lucky. I think that Daniel Coyle calls it ignition. So there was a little group of us that dragged everybody up. And we had other great players as well. I just remember winning the junior league of the area and just destroying everybody. And you get these little kind of things that happen, don't you? And so that was a good grounding because they were much better than I was. And I suppose it dragged me up. But yeah, I mean, I was an average player. I mean, but yeah, I loved competing, and the Tartan Tour was fantastic. And you could add to your £10 a week. It was great.
You must have played with some amazing players. You mentioned Bill Lockie being your boss. You're talking about Colin Dalglish, etc. Must have played with some amazing players over the years back then as well.
Yeah, I did play with a lot of good players. I think the biggest disappointment was fast forward a number of years, and I managed to, I don't know how, I managed to qualify for the first ever Glasgow Classic, which was a European tour event, which you could Monday qualify at that time. So I'll tell you how long ago it was. It was
Wow.
held at Hags Castle. It became the Scottish Open, which moved to Loch Lomond for a
Yep.
number of years. But I qualified. I just remember somehow got to like 6 under par after 8 holes, and I was sponsored by Andrex at that point, and managed to stumble over the line at 18 and 2 under, gasping for air. Made the cut, got into the event, and then played with two guys I could have played with any day of the week. I thought was the most disappointing. I was like, I'm going to play with Ken Brown or something. But no, I think Ken Brown may have won it that year, actually. And plenty of your listeners will have no idea who Ken Brown is. But yeah, that was a highlight and also a low light in that I was playing with two boys that had played every other week in the Blooming Tartan Tour. So yeah,
That
there was a
was
lots of good players. I think you do get lost in your own little world when you're playing, but there's a lot of guys that the names will be familiar to Scottish professionals of my sort of age that were exceptional. They really were. We had an incredibly good. The tour itself was so good, Ross, that's what dragged up the standard as well. When there's money around, people start working hard at their games to make a little bit of an additional income.
Yeah, and I remember watching that Glasgow Classic on TV. I can't remember if it was BBC or ITV, or should I say STV, but I'm sure it was on telly, and like Sandy Lyle, Ken Brown, as you say, was playing. Sure, Sam Torrance was playing in it as well. It was a massive event back then.
So it was. It was a full tour event. I remember standing up at the practice ground. I was nervous enough, never mind what I was just about to face. And they actually used the two rugby pitches at the side of the golf course for the practice ground because the practice ground was so poor at Hags Castle. And it was on Cartha Queen's Rugby Club. So I wander over there, and the hitting area was like the beach. They had sanded it. And I'm looking down thinking, this doesn't look very forgiving. And I remember, strangely enough, I was standing beside Ken Brown, and this kind of noise was coming from his golf ball that was a bit unusual to me. I didn't quite know what was going on, the strike quality. So I stand up and I thought, I'll just clip a couple of wedges 50 metres. So the first one was about 5 yards in front of me. Honestly, I just hit it about 2 inches fat and it just went flop. And I went, so that didn't help the state much, especially when a world class golfer standing beside you. So that was it was a realization of you're not quite, you haven't arrived here, Ken, just because you're playing in my one and only European Tour event. But that was it. So I suppose there's lots of guys would love to say they played the European Tour event, wouldn't they? I managed to do that. I played 72 holes, but 36 of those were the practice round, but there we go.
Brilliant. Oh, that's awesome. And then later on in life, Kendall, you mentioned you got to that, I guess, inflection point where you wanted to change everything, but what took you there in terms of how you were feeling and the situation? And what was it because you've obviously made great progress in terms of playing at that point, probably feeling you're really, I guess, motivated to keep practicing and all that stuff, but you mentioned that it kind of stopped. So what was that like? And I guess in more detail.
That was great when you stand up, having, being the expert, standing up on the tee and you don't know where it's going. It's not a great feeling. You think, I think in direct relationship to how much I knew Ross, I felt as if the less I could do. So the more understanding I had about the golf swing, the less ability I had to play golf. That was what it seemed. And you just start doubting yourself and your ability and think, well, that's just it, which obviously that plays a big part in it. But yeah, the absolute fear and anxiety, hatred's a strong word, but I would say I got pretty close to hating the game. I hated the feeling the game gave me, and that feeling was working hard all week, standing over a drive, just playing with your mates or somebody at the golf club, thinking, I have no idea where this is going. That's as good a reason as anything to change direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And that took you down the path. You met Fred Shoemaker, and when did you actually start the journey with Instinctive Golf and taking it down that path? Was it straight after meeting Fred, or was there a little bit of period of just adjustment and getting used to it?
Well, when you come back from Fred Shoemaker, as I said, you realise the west coast of Scotland and the west coast of America are very different places, and people have very different views on what's acceptable. So when I came home, I felt as if I was lost. And throwing golf clubs went from being a very busy coach to being a very, very quiet coach. So I decided to go back to see Fred again, got another wee boost, and then I went back again. And then I thought, now I need to do this myself. Honestly, Ross, I still had no idea what I was doing. I knew I didn't want to go back and do what I was doing, but I didn't know where I was going. And I knew how to throw a club. I was good at throwing those clubs because I'd done plenty of practice throughout my life. But yeah, I just knew I had to change direction. And out of the blue, giving a guy a lesson, one of my other crazy lessons, I'm sure, he thought, this is really different. You better believe it's different. So he convinced me that there was a business opportunity here. And he was a marketer, and we created a thing called Instinctive Golf. And honestly, I am at the beginning of this journey. I don't know if it's New York or New Year. And the next thing he said, we're going to see IMG. You need to be coaching at the top of this game. And I was thinking, I'm the quietest coach in the west of Scotland now. You're my only pupil, and you tell me I've got to go and work with some tour pros. Anyway, the next thing is we're bashing down the door at IMG, and I'm sitting there with this wee boy lost, and he's just dictating to IMG this, that, and the next thing. And I think just to get us out of the office, we said, okay, you go and spend some time with a guy called Steve Richardson, who was at one time 80s, 90s, late 80s maybe. He was European number one, Ryder Cup, Kiowa Island, big guy from Portsmouth. And that was literally my first interaction with that quality of a player. But he was lost. He was just
Wow.
lost, the guy. Lovely big guy, but his game gone from where it had been to lost. And here I was floundering about with a past world class player, having no real clue what to do. But but I just had to do it. And yeah, I worked with him probably for about 9 months. Not sure I had any impact whatsoever, but it was an experience. There was no doubt about that. And it did open the door to other things. This guy decided then to knock down the door of the PGA and tell them that I needed to be a speaker at the European Coaching Conference. And I'm kind of standing by him, shaking my head, going, no, I don't. And I think, again, they just threw us out of the office at the Belfry by saying, okay, you can be one of the satellite speakers. So David Leibetter was the lead speaker, and I think there was 6 satellite speakers speaking in front of 100 or so people each. So I was one of those. Again, I just think, God, I suppose that I was having to learn to swim by being thrown in at the deep end. But the thing was, I didn't know how to swim, but you learn pretty quickly. So that was a tipping point as well, because in the audience was a guy called Paul Affleck, who had just come off tour, and he contacted me the next day, and that changed the direction of my life again and got me even more involved in guys on tour. And I still wasn't, I was still lost, but these guys were fantastically helpful. I've become amazing friends, Paul Affleck and Paul Eales, who remains on the seniors tour, despite, I think, for the last decade saying that's it, I've had enough, but enough hasn't come yet. Yeah, and that was me heading in a wee bit of a different direction, working with guys on tour, coming back to the shop on a Thursday when the tour kicked off, having to sell Mars bars, jump back in a plane Sunday night, go to wherever I had to go, and then so yeah, it was an interesting time. Very exciting, and something, I probably did think I'd love to coach on tour, but once I'd done it for a few years, a couple of years I think I did it for, I'd kind of grown to think this is not where I want to be. It's a different environment. It's not really a learning environment. It's a pure performance environment. I was more interested in how we learn skills and stuff like that. These guys already had the skills. It was probably Carl Morris or Jamie they needed rather than myself, but I got kind of lucky. I got a break, and Paul Eales introduced me to another Paul. It was important that everybody I coached into was called Paul. But then I worked with Paul McGinley, and that worked out well from a perspective of helping him. And it was because I think, well, this is an interesting fact. I would say that of every guy I've coached into, not one of them had any real formal coaching at the start of their journey in the game. Everyone learned the game themselves. And they really only got to that point where they were getting coached when they either reached international amateur status or got on tour. And then it was a case of, well, I need to get better, so I'll get a coach. So that was something. And Paul McGinley was just one of those guys that when I asked him to consider the game away from where he had started to go and more as a game of shots and skill, it was like a light bulb went on his head. I just remember going out for dinner the first night. I met him, which was at the K Club. He flew me over to the K Club and he said, I'll need to meet you in the other range, because if I meet you in the main range, Bob Torrance, who was his coach, will see it and I'll get in a lot of trouble. Said, so I'll meet you in the other range. I had to kind of slither over to the other range. He arrived, and then we just started hitting shots. And he went out for dinner, and he said, this is how I used to practice as a wee boy. And he said, I think this is going to help me. And he told me he needs to get back in the top 50 in the world, because that's where the money was, and that's where the BGC events were at the time. And he was 160th at that point, which, when you think of his record, was pretty dire. And we just clicked. And within, I think, 6 months, he was 47th in the world. And all I had said to him, literally, Ross, was just bring that flight down, increase that shape, decrease that distance. Honestly, we were just messing about in the range, having fun, like 2 wee boys. But it just clicked. Other guys, you say that to, and they go, yeah, very funny. Just tell me what I'm doing wrong. So I was lucky in that perspective. So that was a nice time. But yeah, tour wasn't all I'd hoped it would be. Good for your ego, but probably not much else.
And did you travel with Paul as well while he was on that journey?
Yeah, a lot of the time. I went to the USPGA with him, which was really nice, because I remember it wasn't nice that he missed the cut. It was horrible. In fact, that was probably one of the darkest times. I remember on the first day, I think it was quite late on in the first day, I looked up at the leaderboard and he was lying about 8th. And a day later, we'd missed the cut. And that was just horrible, horrible, because when we left the course, we hadn't missed the cut. And then literally missed it on by one shot. But when we were out there, when you went to the range, the guy would pick up this little name tag and he'd walk out and put it on a place. And so you would know who was coming because this guy had put whoever out. So Paul McGinley arrives and we look along, the guy's put this little side here. So everybody knows who's hitting, because I'm sure you've been at a British Open, especially in the past. You don't know who the guy is because his bag's turned around the wrong way and you think,
Yeah, they always turn the bag round the wrong way.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
So these little name tags were cool. So anyways, he's hitting a few shots and chatting to a few guys, and I'm still feeling that the wee boy lost a wee bit. But anyway, I looked to the left and this guy's putting down another name plate and it's Tiger Woods. And I thought, no. So McGinley hit about another 10 shots and stopped, and we just thought, well, who wants to? I think it was in Monday, I think it was a Tuesday, but who wants to hit shots when you can watch this guy? He wasn't even at his peak at the time, but it was just unbelievable. Just watching the guy up so close, sort of sensing something about that, the way he struck the ball, it was just magnificent. So that was lovely. And the other interesting thing about the air was I saw rough that we now see on a regular basis at US Opens probably more than anything else. But I remember playing a practice round on the Monday, and Thomas Bjorn was ahead of us. And they were messing about round the green, and we were waiting and waiting and waiting. And anyway, I think they eventually waved us up. But Thomas Bjorn was looking for his ball. He could not find his ball, but the ball was 1 foot off the green. Nobody could find that.
Wow.
That'll tell you what the rough was like. And when we came off the course, I'd never seen anything like it. Paul said, "Hey, come on, we'll go and watch Ollie. He's down here practicing." So we went down and watched Olathabal. He said, "I just want to see how he's dealing with the rough." Well, this was a masterclass. It was unbelievable, Ross. This guy, you can't see the ball. He's about to hit this ball. It's on a downslope. It's running at 12. It's concrete hard. And he's got about 3 feet before he hits the green, and the pin's only 10 feet on. And I'm thinking, what? And he goes into this weird position at address and picks this thing up and slams it down. This thing pops up dead. I mean, dead. Just comes down vertically, lands on the green dead. Almost stopped, and then starts rolling down to the pin. And McGinley thought, it's interesting how he's gone about that. So we would go back and mess about. So there was lovely moments like that when you do see world class up close. And I suppose I love the sense that a lot of that has been learned, not coached. These guys have figured that out by messing about, exploring. Obviously, Seve, same ilk. So
If you've been enjoying the show, please do remember to follow on your favourite podcast platform and share it with a friend. Now let's get back to the pod.
yeah, that was nice. And yeah, I've been to a few other events with McGinley as well. In fact, I caddied for him in the shootout in Germany because Darren, his caddy, got stuck in America. And that was interesting because we ended up in a shootout, which is literally 16 or thereabouts tour pros tee off up the first. 16 of us.
Wow.
And we all walk up the first. And then if you make a birdie, you move on unless everybody else makes a birdie, everybody moves on. And it just whittles down. And eventually by the 9th hole, and it managed to go all the way to the 9th, it was down to Bernard Langer in the German Open, of course. And McGinley. And Bernard tucked him away on the last. But that was a nice experience, just getting up close and just seeing these guys at work, caddies at work, because I certainly wasn't a caddy. So yeah, there were some nice experiences, definitely.
That's incredible. And Kendall, we haven't even talked really at all yet about your own philosophy on, and I guess I'll say coaching, but I think what you're talking about there is skill acquisition and development for people. So you went through that journey with Fred, you've had these kind of tour players, and but you work with all types of golfers. But I'd love you to just talk about your philosophy around how you see golf and what people I don't want to say should, but could be doing to work in their game, and what would be different maybe from what they're kind of trying today, where you talk about positions. Certainly you don't talk about that, but people, you would look, go on the internet, they're on YouTube, they're looking at, oh, where's my position, my backswing. But I'd love for you to talk about your own philosophy, Kendall, and take us down that journey as well.
Well, as I said, Ross, that changed when I met Fred. He definitely was the key that opened that door, albeit when I opened it, it was an abyss. But as I've spent 20 odd years exploring it further, I suppose motor learning has just fascinated me for the last decade. I think recently with AI, the access you can get to the studies and research that's been done on motor learning is incredible. It's amazing it's available. The more I've looked into it, the more I think we are so far away in this game of golf from coaching it appropriately. It's unbelievable from the outset. So the way we're introducing people to the game, to me, is fundamentally flawed when it comes to learning. It really is. It's a rule-based experience where it should be a task-based experience, and people should be allowed to struggle. They should be given the freedom to explore. Our job would be to guide that, and to do that, of course, you have got to be that kind of player yourself. So if you're not, then you can't go down this avenue. So really all I'm doing with the players nowadays is what I'm doing with my own game, and that is continual exploration. So yeah, all the research in the world, and we don't even need the research in the world, do we? Look, golf is just problem solving with tools. That's all it is. We've 14 weird and wonderful tools, and we're trying to solve a myriad of problems. And that should be the start point. There should be a very simple problem for somebody to solve at the beginning of the journey. What that is up to the coach to decide. But it has to start the process of them developing the know-how with regards to learning, and why trying to get the basics right at the beginning is a fundamentally flawed concept, because basics should emerge from solving the problem. If you're open to exploration, exploring this grip and exploring this position and exploring this delivery of the club, then basics will emerge and they'll be yours. Because we don't need to look around the world, do we, too often to see how many golf swings perform in a way that if you were looking at them visually, you would say, well, he can't play.
Yeah,
Justin Johnson can't be a top player. Scotty Scheffler is playing in the local medal, isn't he? That the visual. Jim Furyk, one of the most consistent golfers that's ever walked this planet, nobody would believe it. If you didn't see
yeah,
what he produced, it wouldn't be down to his swing. Everybody wants their swing to look like Adam Scott or Tiger, but what we've got to do is the fingerprint of your swing will emerge from solving the problem. And the problem can only be solved if you deliver the tool in an appropriate way. And as you do that, your body then starts to having to work around that. So that's how a technique emerges. But what we do in golf is we teach the basics to get them correct, to get them solid at the beginning. And even that stops the process of exploration, because there's a right way to do it. But in learning, in all motor learning, people should be doing a thing called motor babbling. And that's what a baby does when it's trying to learn to talk. So although people won't appreciate talking is a motor skill, people will think talking is a motor skill. And you are moving the muscles in your mouth and your tongue and the back of your throat to make noises. And the only way that a baby can learn to do that is make just noises, and then it starts to adjust the way it's using those muscles to make a different noise. Write a book about that. You can't even see that at work. But it's the genius of a human being that we can do that. And I've got a 2-year-old granddaughter, and I'm seeing that in front of my face. And it's just amazing to witness. So all we're trying to do is hit a ball with a stick over there. We're not trying to move the muscles of the mouth to this position and that position to produce these noises. So that is how learning happens. And the babbling is then the messing about bit, the failure. Dads, coaches, me in the past don't want that failure. It's like we see the pupil failing as a reflection on my ability to coach rather
Yeah.
than allowing it to happen and accepting this is how learning is. This is the messy bit of the learning process. But we try and bypass that. That's why you'll hear a lot of videos on YouTube. Your coaches saying this, that, and next time with body positions, and then the pupil does it. Most of the time when I look at those videos, whatever the coach has asked them to do, they just haven't done. But
Yeah.
the guy will hit a shot that's better, and the coach will say, "Yep, that's it." And it's almost like we kept patting ourselves in the back. I kept patting myself in the back, saying, "I've given you some good information. Look how good you're hitting it. Am I brilliant?" Next week, the guy was back where he was. Nothing had changed. Just he got a wee boost from me being positive and him getting excited, and then the plaster fell off. So, yeah, in general, everything in this game is about your ability to use those tools to solve the problems. And the only way you'll solve those problems really is through some guidance, yeah, but through your own exploration. And that takes courage because you'll have to say, I'm not buying what the world's buying. And I'm going to forge my own path here. And a technique will emerge because you
Yeah.
don't know. Jim Furyk didn't know his technique looked like that. Scotty Scheffler didn't know his technique looked like that until he saw it. Jack Nicklaus didn't look, it's like nobody's copying Nicklaus. Nobody's copying Trevino. Nobody's copying Palmer. Nobody's copying Furyk or Mark Wolf, Scotty Scheffler, et al. Nobody's copying those swings. They're all copying swings that fit the model. But we're talking about the best players that have ever walked the planet. Don't
Yeah.
copy Jack. Don't copy Jim Furyk. Don't copy anybody. Solve the problem with this tool. Deliver the club in a specific way that you are aware of. See what happens and adjust.
It's really interesting, Kendall, listening to you after all these years, and I've stayed, I guess, close to keeping up with what you're doing in regards to just skill acquisition. I listen to Carl Morris's podcast, and you're on it quite often. And it's always a great reminder to me that the fact that I've got whatever grip or I've got whatever stance isn't necessarily what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to hit a shot. So if I get back to just playing shots and trying to see the pattern that I'm looking for, and I've mean the pattern of the ball, am I hitting it high? Am I hitting it low? Can I hit it high? Can I hit it low? And Scott Dixon was on the podcast, and I think he talks really incredibly positively about you, Kendall, all the time. And in that podcast that came out from Scott, that before he met you, he couldn't hit a draw. Basically, you had all these lessons, and he's obviously a PGA pro himself, and he'd gone down the same path all the time, and he got to a point where he just didn't really know what he thought he was trying to do. And he said he met with you, and the first day you worked together, he said he had this kind of soft, not powerful cut, and you got him hitting, slinging draws and hooks and powerful shots. And I reflect back, I haven't seen Scott for a long time now, but I remember him being on the range at Dalmahoy, and I tell people, like, he'd have a bit of a split grip, standing open, and he's standing smashing driver with a 30-yard draw, and I'm like, oh my God. And I didn't know that before he'd worked with you that he had this, what he said was really a weak cut. It just blew me away, but it comes back to what you're talking about is what's the skills that you're trying to acquire, what you're actually trying to do with the ball, and do you have the bravery to say, well, I don't need to stand with my stance shut. I don't need my shoulders at a 30-degree angle. I don't need to get to this, but I just need to deliver the club to the ball with the right conditions that make it do what I'm looking for. That's essentially it, right? It doesn't matter what it looks like because everybody's body's different. I think that's the part that people forget as well.
It's funny you bring up Scott because the other side of Scott Dixon, as you may well know, maybe not, is he's become a very adept trick shot artist. Now, there is so much to be learned from that. And another good friend of mine, Jeremy Dale, who I'm just about to speak with next week, is another level of trick shot artist, one of probably the best in the world. The thing about trick shots is they just give you this unbelievable window into how learning truly happens, because these guys are doing things that are way more complex than golf.
Yeah.
There's no books ever been written on it. There's no instruction. There's no coaches. You go out there and you do it. And Scott has got this shot that he sent me a video. So he's got 3 golf balls at 3 different heights, maybe knee height, hip height, chest height, and they're all in a line away from him. And he's about to hit all these golf balls on these big high tees with a driver. But the driver's shaft is a hose pipe.
Sounds like Scott.
Now, so he's addressing it in the video, right? You can see the 3 golf balls. You can see the grip of the driver, but you can't see the head because the head's going down onto the ground. The head's on the ground because of the hose pipe shaft. And he just starts this swing and he just goes boom, boom, boom and hits them. Now, he's got to the point where he feels he can then shape them. Now, you explain that. You write a book about that. You teach that. That is unteachable, but it is obviously learnable. That is golf. That is how golf should be learned. That is the epitome of problem solving. And the lovely thing about that journey, and I know this for certain with Jeremy because he's a good friend, and I definitely know it with Scott, is if you ask trick shot artists, I would say 100% they will tell you they own their trick shots. Now, why is that? Well, you don't have to look much further than what other things you own in your life to realize it comes down to the sense of knowing that I can carry out this skill. And the reason they know so certainty with such certainty, even when they fail, to me is because of the way that they learned it. Pure exploration. And to do something like that is madness. You think it cannot be done. Well, now both of them would probably agree that their golf games don't sit in that same bracket of certainty. Why? Well, that's not how their golf games were learned. And that, to me, is all of us should be looking at it thinking, why is that? I said, well, it is that because for lots of reasons, there was a structure put around golf coaching in the 1970s that has just gone on and grown arms and legs. And now we know everything about everything. But primarily, the club golfer that I see today is doing exactly the same nonsense they were doing 70 years ago or 50 years ago. Not 70, I'm not 70 yet. 50 years ago. They're still coming over the stop. They're still casting. They're still duffing it, still healing it, whatever it is. And then you've got guys doing that is, it's the epitome of motor learning. And that, everybody will have seen the trick where the guy's keeping the ball up on the wedge, up in the air, turns the wedge round and balances the ball on the back of the face of the wedge.
Yep.
Now, Scott has been at that for 3 months the last time I spoke to him, and he said, I've done it twice. Right?
Wow.
Now, are you willing to fail to that level to eventually master it? That is, again, the reality of learning. That's how the beginner in golf should going through that process. Some will struggle dramatically and some won't. And a lot of that will have been down to just the journey they've had in their lives with regard to motor skills, playing sports, building up coordination, and etc. And they will then apply that to this game. But other people will really struggle. Are they willing to struggle through that to eventually come out the other side and say, I managed to do what that task, that problem, I managed to solve it. And it's a big, bit of excitement. And all they've done is they've managed to hit the ball on the ground to a target. They're jumping up, high-fiving every day, and the guy beside them, he's already on to being able to bend it. And they're both started on the same day. So that, to me, that's the thing, the struggle that Scott and Jeremy have when they start bolting new skills into their repertoire. That is learning. That's at the heart of learning. And people don't want to do that because, can I just avoid that? if you just tell me what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah.
Just tell me what I'm doing wrong and then I can avoid all that struggle. I said, well, no, I can't. I can tell you, but you won't avoid the struggle. In fact, it'll probably add to the struggle. Trick shots are the window, a true window into how we should be approaching golf coaching.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
hitting a ball on the ground with a driver 30 yards or a tennis ball on the ground with a driver for 30 yards to a total beginner is a trick. Because a trick's just a skill.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is, what's the next level of trick? The next skill. That's, to me, the process we've missed out. And I know why we've created structure in golf, but I think it's fundamentally flawed. And I think the PGAs of the world need to be looking at neuroscience and motor learning and factoring it in far more to how they coach or teach young professionals to coach. Because if they don't, in 100 years' time, we'll be having the same conversation.
Yeah, and I think, is it Carol Morris's phrase that he says is that it makes great commercial sense to have people lined up in a driving range and have a certain amount of time and coached the way that I guess has been coached all that time, but it doesn't necessarily make sense for the people that are trying to learn, right? And even I listened to Claude Harmon. He's got a podcast about golf. It's really interesting. He was talking in his latest episode about Mo Norman. He talked about DJ. He talked about Scotty Scheffler. And he's learned that from obviously Butch and his uncles who are famous teachers. But I remember a quote that his uncle was saying, why is nobody teaching anybody how to hit the ball like Lee Trevino? He's one of the greatest strikers of all time. It seems to be a sort of cookie cutter approach and getting everyone looking
Well,
the same.
well,
Whereas that's not the task, right? That isn't what you're trying to do. You're trying to move a ball to a target. So surely you just need to find the way to do that yourself.
it's very alluring, isn't it, to say, well, why don't we just teach it like Lee Trevino? Well, that's as flawed as teaching it like Adam Scott.
Yeah.
Honestly, both those approaches are flawed. Jim Furyk against Ernie Els is flawed. Scotty Scheffler against whoever. That technique has emerged from these guys solving the problem of the tools, and they didn't even know the technique was emerging. That's
Yep.
why we all walk differently, we all run differently, we all throw differently. And when you get to a game like golf, it can be quite an obvious difference, visually very obvious difference. But it's just as flawed for people to say, well, you should be teaching it like Lee Trevino. What? Well, don't teach Lee Trevino's golf swing, but try and solve the problem the way that he is. So can you hit this shot or can you hit that shot? And yeah, I can. Well, I don't know whether you're going to be very happy about this or not, but this amazing control over you've got over the golf ball after 10 years has produced a golf swing that looks like an ape falling out of a tree. Now, you're going to be that happy when you look at it, thinking, God, honestly, I felt I was Tiger Woods. And now I'm more Eamon Darcy than I'm Tiger Woods. And I said, so why do you want to now change your golf swing? Which brings me back to an interesting quote. I'll just get this very quickly. It was go back to Steve Richardson. I remember he played in the Masters. He said this was the first time he had ever seen a video camera on the range. And he said he was walking down on the Monday morning down the range, and he noticed there's a couple of these tripods with video cameras on it. And he said to his caddy, he said, what's all this about? He went, oh, I think it's the coaches that are doing that. I think they're videoing the swings and stuff. And he said, I reckon that stuff will kill these guys. That's what he said.
Wow.
And a year later, he went to that stuff, and he was right. It destroyed him. Because anybody who knows Steve Richardson knows very idiosyncratic golf swing. Massive guy, huge shoulders, picked it up, dropped it inside, hits a 30-yard slinging hook draw with the driver miles. I always remember asking him on the range if he could hit me a fade. So he stands up and he hits this thing. It's like a 15-yard draw. And he went, there you go. Honestly, he did. So we had to bring in his caddy. I said, hit me another fade. He said, Stevie. So he hits another draw. And the caddy said, 10-yard draw. He went, it was a fade. I went, because your eye becomes so accustomed to something, you don't see what's actually happening in front of you. So the feeling was, it's a fade feeling compared to what I'm not used to, but in reality it wasn't. So I think we abandoned the learning to fade the ball at that point. It's not the thing to do on a Monday before the tournament starts.
Wow. And then, I mean, some of the things that come to mind for me, Kendall, that you yourself, you still go out and you continue to hit balls. And I know it's pretty cold up the road at the moment, but talk to listeners through your practice regime these days. Is it less than 1,000 balls a day yet, or how are you coping?
My body has definitely got me hitting less. Yeah, I understandably have been tagged crazy, and I know a lot of the top amateurs who kind of know of me think, "Oh, he's mad, isn't he, that guy?" Honestly, they think I'm completely mad, and I think when you listen to my practice regime, it's pretty mad. But I am obsessed. I'm obsessed, addicted to hitting golf balls. So yeah, today, and as everybody knows, for the last couple of weeks, it's been totally and utterly frozen, but nothing stops me. So I'll be up there. The only time that moss is any good on the range at Bonnet Golf Club is at this time of year, because it gives you a wee cushion and it's not concrete hard. But yeah, I'll go and I'll probably hit, on average, 90% of the days that I'm on this planet, I'm hitting golf balls. Probably now down to about 300 or so this afternoon. Just messing about, having some fun. Literally just having some fun. Almost entering into a wee bit like trick shots that I wonder how low and how cutty I could hit this 7-iron, and then I keep challenging myself, saying, well, that wasn't very low. And then I go again, I'll try and bring it down. And now I'm contorting myself into all these weird and wonderful positions just as a bit of fun. But a byproduct of that fun is definitely a sense that I now feel I could hit that little kind of feathery fade, because you get so in tune with the club that you, having gone to the extremes, I can feel those little sort of nuances that'll hit that little draw and that knockdown fade or whatever. So that's why I love trick shots, Happy Gilmore, stuff like that, everything. Intentional shanks. I'm up there with some of the best intentional shankers in the world. If there was a order of merit shanking,
I've seen
I'm
that in
there.
person. It's brilliant. You and Scott, and I think it was Paul Affleck.
Scott,
It was
this is an
unbelievable.
interesting one, Scott. I know we're running out of time, but I held a summit 15 years ago, probably in Spain, and I was wondering what I would do with the guys. So I decided back home that I was going to hit two 20-yard shots with my 58-degree wedge, and I wanted to have the same start position, same ball position, same everything. But I was going to start with the ball in the middle of the club face, and then I was going to intentionally shank it 20 yards right. Okay? And then the next one, I want to put it in the same start position, and I want to toe shank it in exactly the same place. So it took me quite a lot of takes to get two shots that looked as if they were almost identical. So I filmed those, then I chopped the videos up, and these 20-odd coaches that came to Spain, I showed them the videos and I said, guys, I know it's laughing time that I'm going to show you my intentional shanks, but there's a purpose to it. However, the next thing is you'll all have played, you'll have had pupils that are shanking, and you'll have ideas how to stop the shanking. I've got split the screen. I said, one of these is a toe shank and one of these is a heel shank. So if you'll notice at the beginning, they're both identical. So nobody could see any difference. So then halfway back, I stopped both videos and I said, guys, who's putting A in the shank bracket and B, the other one, in the toe shank? No answer. No, can't divulge that just now. Okay, so top of the backswing. Now, boys, who's a couple of them started saying, well, I think the left hand one's the toe shank and the right hand. And the other guy went, not a chance. So they started arguing, right? And then halfway down, I stop it. So I've got the kind of shafts getting pretty parallel with the ground. And now, well, that's definitely a toe shank. And and another guy's, no, it's not. And then eventually the impact interaction. What was fascinating about that was the experience for me to do that is extreme. Honestly, to toe shank it and heel shank it feels like two massively different deliveries. But they couldn't see it. And that's what I was trying to get over to the guys. I was like, you can't see what makes a golf swing work. You can't see what makes and allows learning to happen. But we keep coaching visually, trying to see what's wrong, when what we need to get is under the hood and find out what's going on there, because you need to be experiencing what I'm experiencing to make shanking happen, to not make shanking happen. And that was I always remember it was quite a moment because the boys were arguing back and forth that this he's definitely toe shanking now, and they just couldn't see it. That's amazing, isn't it? You wouldn't think that you wouldn't be able to see it, but they couldn't. So anyway, there you go. That's why,
And it's
as I said, you can't see what makes a golf swing work.
amazing. I remember listening to Jordan Spieth, who's got a phenomenal short game, and he was asked how he developed his short game, and people are thinking he's going to go coaching, blah blah blah. And I can't remember what course he was brought up at, but the course he played at had a AstroTurf green, so it didn't have a normal green. It just had AstroTurf chipping here. I guess maybe it wasn't a big golf club or whatever, and they were doing this to just keep it in play all the time. And he said he literally practiced trying to spin it on that AstroTurf. That was how he learned, and he got a kind of really steep angle of attack. Not because someone said, hey, you need to do a steep angle attack to hit that pitch shot and stop it in AstroTurf. He literally just found out himself. And I think that tells you everything you need to know in many ways, right?
Absolutely. It does, because there's a guy who sticks it in the ground to an extent, as you said, it's sharp on the ball, and then you go and watch other guys who'll just tiger. I mean, literally hit a similar shot and not have any damage on the grass at all. So who's right? Well, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Who's right and who's wrong? It doesn't matter. They've hit the
Doesn't
shot.
matter. I mean, there's a lovely a little clip, I think, of Tiger with one of the girls. I can't remember. That's terrible. I can't remember her name. And she sees the shot this way, and he says, "I just don't get that." You know, it's like world class woman in Tiger Woods, and then you bring in whoever. I think another one he's done with Scotty Scheffler, and Scotty sees it this way, and and that to me is so key, isn't it? It's not about that's one way to do it. Go and explore what Tiger does. So what if you were opening that club face up? Because there's a moment in one of the videos with Tiger, he says, I love to draw all the shots around the green. I love to draw it. And I'll draw it like this. And he's got the face, I mean, wide open. Like you can't believe how open. He's hitting a 40-yard draw shot. And he made a comment in one of the videos where he said, I must close it at somewhere during the swing, but I'm not sure. And I thought, there it is. There it is. He's now lost access to how he does it, but he just knows how to do it. And he hits this little releasey draw, and there's no damage on the turf at all. And then you watch someone else and they take these little nippy divots. And so go and explore being sharp on the ball. Go and explore releasing the club and hitting little draws. And don't be bound by the rules that you think. And if you become that adaptable, you should be able to solve little problems that you've not come across easier because you're now used to that. That's the kind of default mode is problem solving. And that's what we tend to get caught up in, isn't it? I'm trying to reduce all the variables, DeChambeau. I'm trying to reduce all the variables. And then you look at something like Seve, and he's got just a gazillion variables that he calls upon. Tiger's the same. Talking about all the different grips he uses and all the different deliveries he uses around the green. Astonishing. I mean, astonishing. That's an explorer at work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in a way, so is DeChambeau. He's an explorer, just exploring in a different direction. So that's not wrong. Of course, it's not
No.
wrong. He's a world-class golfer. So that'd be one of the things I would suggest to anybody is you've got to start exploring, moving the tool in different ways to see what happens. And you might bump into along that journey something that is transformative in your game, but then you're going to have to keep going, and you need the repetition without repetition of doing that to bolt it into the trust category that you'll go and use it on the golf course. If you've got doubt
Absolutely.
about it, it's probably not going to work out well. But if you're willing to put in the time and effort and explore it and explore this and think, I can't believe I've got the club like this and I'm hitting that shot and it's beautiful and I would never have expected that. That's how these guys have learned. It really is. But it's not how we teach.
Absolutely. Well, Kendall, it's been An incredible pleasure having you on. You've been fantastic as always. I love listening to you. You've been on Carol Morrissey's podcast as well. So if people want to get in touch with you, how can they find you? Where can they go?
Oh, they can't. I'm now a recluse. I don't want anybody coming near me now. I've got too many shots to hit. They can go on the website, which is the tiredest, oldest website in the world, and I know that because I get about 20 emails every day asking to update it, but I'm not going to because it kind of gives the gist of it. My email address is in there, my phone number's in there, Kendal at igcoaching.co.uk. Happy to hear from anybody, of course, and give my tuppence worth if it's any use or not. But no, it's been a pleasure, Ross, catching up after all these years.
Yeah, fantastic. Your stories are incredible. Thanks a lot, Kendall. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Kendal McWade for joining me and for sharing his golfing journey. If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow Link by Golf on your favourite podcast platform, leave a review and share it with someone who loves golf and people's journeys. You can also find the show on Instagram at linkbygolf2024 for future episodes, clips and insights. I'm Ross McGuire. Thanks for listening.
Lomond Golf Tours have helped thousands of guests build bespoke golf trips to create a magical experience. Travel in style with our executive chauffeur travel, whether it's golf on a major championship venue or one of our hidden gems, 5-star accommodation or a boutique bed and breakfast, or is it whiskey tasting on a private boat? Lomond Golf Tours are here to help build the tour of a lifetime. Whether you're celebrating a special occasion or ticking it off your bucket list, embark on a trip that you'll remember forever. Visit www.lomondgolftours.com.